Deep state. What exactly is deep state and who does it consist of and what do they do? Well, we've always talked about this, that this is a nebulous group of characters who all want a certain set of outcomes because they are invested into it. I mean, you can go back to the time of the Napoleonic Wars where Rothschild from London had financed the British Army, and it is believed that he knew a day in advance of what was going to happen in the war and that the British were winning, because the prevalent opinion at that point of time was that Napoleon would win because he was such a successful general. Well, what he did was he cashed out on this information because people were thinking that Napoleon will win. The British securities were being, I think it was called British bonds. These were being sold at a loss. He cleaned up all that, and 24 hours later, everybody realized that the British had won and he cleaned up big. Now, how did he do that? Well, he had his own secret service, a combination of couriers and pigeons who would reflect back the data to him from various positions of the Waterloo area, which is where the war was fought. So, my point in saying that is sometimes people say that deep state is mostly bankers because these are the ones who are financing armies, and when the winner wins, they get to dictate what they want, and they usually clean up, because after a war the loser is practically on its knees. They can go in and pick up whatever they want. This is something that's the prevalent opinion. So I just mentioned this to tell you that this is the prevalent opinion. 100 years later, when Hitler was trying to organize Nazi groups, there were some people in United States and in United Kingdom and also in Germany who were silent supporters of Hitler. They thought that by giving him money and support that he could control him, because nobody wanted a resurgent Germany. In fact, United States as government itself funded a lot of things. There was a plan under which Germany was allowed to get back on its feet. Be that as it may, it is believed that one or two wars were even persuaded for their outcomes to kind of give Hitler a certain sense of invincibility, and then after that he never looked back, and also he could no longer be controlled. This is the story. They say that deep state could not control him after that. Now what is happening is that we all know about the story about the euro, which was basically a combination of a multiple set of currencies to come up with a single entity that could in effect challenge the United States or the mighty United States dollar. Who did this? And we are going to start our story from there, and this is a small slide deck. Please like this video, and if you have not already subscribed to our channel, do subscribe to our channel. Here we go.
Biggest gift I think that 𝗤𝗏𝗏 has given me is a feeling of peace.
Therapists and doctors are doing a wonderful job here.
Deep state ke Haseen Sapne. At least at this point of time, it looks like the dreams that they are having could be a little bit far-fetched. Now, much of this is connection of dots, and we have some references that might give you some clues into how these dots are playing out. And you're welcome to give by way of comments what you think of this, but we thought that this is a fairly compelling story that you can listen to and watch. Europe was chosen as the initial testing ground for the deep state with New World Order. What is New World Order concept? Well, first thing was the EU, the European Union. It is an experiment with open borders and testing the functionality and challenges of nations without borders concept. Now, after that, you saw what happened. Migrants brought in on boatloads and no questions asked. Everywhere they were forced to accept them. The last one, I think, was Romania, and they were asked to take 100,000 by EU, and I think Romania balked, and then on the elections the right-wing candidate won, but they have basically thrown that and gone back to the old one, who maybe is a 𝗤𝙧𝙤𝗏, who knows. But right now Macron, Keir Starmer, maybe to some extent Merz, and many other countries, everybody is looked at with suspicion that is this person doing the bidding of the deep state. I'm not saying that each one is, but you can see the tilt of these people. For example, Macron has banned Marine Le Pen, and the party can still be there, but they are trying to make sure that she would not be able to contest elections. Likewise, in Germany, following the stunning victory of AfD, alternate for Deutschland, they are trying to ban that party. And they continue to win. They are continuing to surge across Germany. It was initially a complete sweep in East Germany area, but now they are continuing to surge. So there is another problem there. Anyway, let's get back to EU. In EU, what happened was, initially there were, I think, 9 countries or 10 countries, but the primary members were, I think, Germany and France and a few other countries. I'm not 100% sure if UK joined at the beginning or if they joined a little later, but we all know Brexit, which meant that they exited. In fact, to this day, Ireland, which is an independent country, is still a member of the EU. So the EU had a group of nations, and then they wanted to have a currency that would reflect this grouping of nations. It's not a group of nations, it's a grouping of nations. And when the euro was being conceptualized and being put to be adopted, what happened was every country had its own currency. Now you had to reconcile these things. Well, when somebody was told, okay, now we are going to come up with a single currency for all these countries, that person, who was a banking expert, told Helmut Kohl, who was the biggest member because Germany was the biggest player there, that you need to consolidate the debt also. You can't just announce a euro currency and not look at the debt of each of these nations. But Kohl evidently knew that if he had put this to vote at the Bundestag, that's the equivalent of Parliament in Germany, that he would lose that vote 7-3. So what he did was he unilaterally signed off on it, and he did not allow to look into consolidation of debt, because if he had, he would have known that some countries were on the verge of bankruptcy. A few years later, Angela Merkel comes along, and when Greece's situation blows up, by that time many other countries were also added to this. Then Greece's situation blew up. She did not want to intervene. That's why you had the Greece crisis. Well, then what happened? Many of the bankers were looking at Greece situation and said, well, this domino has fallen. Who's the next domino? They went after Spain. Today, the reality is that Spain has capital controls in place. I've said this thing many times. So does China, by the way. China has capital controls when it comes to dollars. I mean, we keep talking about de-dollarization, but look at it, guys. These are all people who don't want to let go of the dollars they have. If they have dollars, particularly think about China. If China is desperately hoarding its dollars, what's the question of de-dollarization? Anyway, I just want to leave it for those of you who want to think about it. It's not something that's going to happen that soon. I can tell you that. Maybe as the general direction towards it is going, but somebody explained this thing in a very simple way. If the dollar is rising in value vis-a-vis other currencies, then de-dollarization is on. And if the dollar is falling with respect to other currencies, then re-dollarization is on. Why? Because people still are piling money into the United States. I mean, the fact that despite a recession being reported at least or hidden for at least 3 or 4 quarters, the stock market is at all-time highs. Only the last couple of days there has been a correction, as many countries are beginning to grapple with the fact that tariffs are beginning to have a detrimental impact on the lives of Americans. Okay, so the euro was introduced. There was a European Parliament, and this was established to test a global governance model simulating how a centralized authority could override individual national sovereignties. Well, for all these things, going back a little bit now, this was in the works for many years, and then there was a 3-year window given for each country to comply with the euro. They had to do some cleanup in books and things of that nature, but again, like I said, it did not say that, look, you have so much debt, and therefore when you enter, you need to have a concrete plan on how you are going to erase that debt. As a matter of fact, when mergers happen between companies, what happens is the acquiring company will make absolutely sure that the company it is acquiring is squeaky clean, that it knows its numbers, its assets, its liabilities, especially open lawsuits and the damages from those open lawsuits should this company that it's acquiring go on to lose. And then they do a cost benefit analysis and so on and so forth. A lot goes into merger and acquisition of companies. I just thought I'll put that out. So what happened was, when USSR was still going strong, we are talking about maybe mid 80s, NATO was powerful, and USSR was continuing to rule. They had gotten into Afghanistan. If I remember correct, Afghanistan they entered in 1979. And in mid 80s, it was Ronald Reagan who was the president, and United States decided on a policy to overproduce crude just to try and weaken USSR, because much of its economy at that time and even now was running on the money that it was making from selling energy from the Ural Mountains. Now, they overproduced so much that the cost of a barrel of crude came down to close to $13 a barrel, and I think for a few days it came down even to single digits. I still remember as a student, I was paying 53 cents to a gallon. I mean, I toured US like you wouldn't believe, and I hardly put a hole through my wallet. I mean, at a student salary, you can't do much. It was a great experience at that time, enjoying that low price. So this was in mid to late 80s. And then, of course, then the USSR collapsed, and Gorbachev was the one who decided that, okay, we are going to take the word of NATO and Reagan, and I'm going to trust them, and broke up USSR. And you had all these countries breaking free, including Ukraine. I think Ukraine was one among the first to leave the USSR. And then the new game started. NATO started expanding to the east, even though NATO promised to Gorbachev that not an inch of land will be added to the NATO, but they kept on expanding until they were right on the border of Russia. So that's how this whole Russian invasion in 2022, I'll come to that in a minute. But you see, what has happened is that the deep state has always coveted Russia's vast natural resources. And when Gorbachev stepped down, he was the last general secretary of USSR. Then after that, what happened? Russia tried to move towards democracy. The next 10 years was hell for the Russian people, because they lurched from crisis to crisis. They had to deal with the oligarchs. I don't know how the transfer of wealth happened from the communist regime to the oligarch. There were like 7 or 8 oligarchs, and these people controlled much of the assets of Russia, and they were one side, and then there were people who were for democracy, and Boris Yeltsin was the face of that. I think he was the mayor of Moscow, if I remember correctly, before he became the president. So Russia wrote its own constitution, and at that time there was a severe upheaval. Russia's currency, the ruble, would collapse. If I remember correctly, they even tried to make it convertible at some point of time, and then that failed. But suffice to say that Yeltsin was having a lot of challenges. Then Yeltsin chose somebody to succeed him who was neither a communist nor was he part of the oligarchs, and that was Vladimir Putin. 1999, Putin becomes the president, and I think Yeltsin died in 2007, but by 1999, he was very weak, and they say that he was being blackmailed by many entities, and therefore he just said, okay, I've had enough with it, I want to retire. But he chose Putin, and it is believed that he told Putin, think of Russia. See, Russia has a very proud history, and also an affinity with arts. And the deep state always coveted the huge, vast natural resources of Russia, and that's why they keep trying to, go at Russia, hoping that somehow they will be able to break it up and then divide the spoils. In fact, yesterday, if I remember correctly, Trump put out a statement saying, well, Ukraine has what it takes to win back all the territories it has lost. This from a man who was telling Ukraine not long ago that you need to settle with Russia. So I just don't understand why this 180 degrees volte-face by the President of the United States. What changed on the ground that made him make that claim? I don't know. But all I'm trying to tell you is that Russia remains a coveted place. Now, let's go back to 1995. What happened? Like NATO was planning to expand. They were adding one country after the other, and then they were having these war rooms. NATO doesn't really have work. They have not seen action except maybe to try to smoothen things in like Yugoslavia when it was balkanized and it was going back to its basic seven countries, if I remember correctly: Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia Herzegovina, and so on, and not a whole lot of other things. So NATO has been war rooming how to see what happens with Ukraine. Remember, Ukraine had signed a deal with Russia saying that in exchange for all the nuclear weapons that we are going to give, our weapons to you, Russia, you will never attack us. Well, Russia went back on its word. So you have all these, this happened, that happened, then this happened, then that happened. Then there were two Minsk agreements, Minsk 1 and Minsk 2. In both of these, there were some things that Ukraine agreed to. I think Minsk 2 was signed by Volodymyr Zelensky, and then he reneged on that. He did not do anything that he had signed up in that. So it's a mess, okay. But the point I'm trying to make is that when he was a Russian speaking person but of Ukrainian descent who wanted to have a neutral stance. He did not want to lean towards NATO, nor did he want to lean towards Russia. Everybody in the NATO said that, oh, this guy is a puppet of Putin. Then you had the Maidan revolution in 2014 where you had, what's her name, Victoria Nuland, caught in a conversation with the ambassador saying that we did. So Russia always plays it back to say that you guys are, hand in glove. You are the ones fomenting all these revolutions. So after that, Russia annexed Crimea. They had a sham of an election where they took a plebiscite to all the people. Would you like to merge with Russia? And evidently it was like a 97% vote. Be that as it may, well, they went and annexed Crimea. I don't know if the plebiscite came after they annexed or before, but it's okay. A lot of fuzzy things happened at that point of time. This was in 2014, and now we are in 2025. And the reason Russia said that they were annexing Crimea was that there was ethnic cleansing of Slavs by NATO forces. This is Russia's version. Now, Putin justified this by saying that he was trying to protect Russian-speaking Slavs in Crimea. Now, this latest one, what is the deep state strategy? The deep state looks like it wants the war to continue and looks like it has arm twisted Trump to agree to this, because why else would Trump say that now Ukraine stands an excellent chance to get back all of its territory when the opposite is what is being seen on the ground. I'll have 𝗤𝗡𝗙 Chakrabarti come back and give an update on this maybe in a week's time or so we get the exact situation on the ground. Anyway, so this Putin invasion of Ukraine is seen as a first major setback for the deep state, which was hoping that somehow NATO would get involved in the conflict. Like, for example, Russia would attack a NATO country and then they would use Article 5 to invade Russia and then, of course, break it up into parts. And in order to do that, they don't want either India to buy Russian oil nor China to buy Russian oil. Well, those two are continuing to happen. So you have this problem as what's going to happen next. They may try to see if EU can woo India. I think that's already happening, to try and balance out the thing. In the EU's world, there are four superpowers. That is America, Russia, China, and the EU itself. And they think that anyone who aligns with India is going to have the upper hand in the years and decades to come. These are all, again, modeling that is going on. So now what is happening is NATO appears to be helping in strikes across the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant and Kursk Oblast, aiming at provoking a nuclear war. Kursk is something that the Ukrainian army controlled for, I think, 2 years or so. Then they had to essentially be driven out from there, and Russia claims that there are many people from NATO countries, soldiers from NATO countries whom they have taken as prisoners of war, and there is some exchanges going on. That's an ugly saga that's taking place on its own. So now what is happening? The deep state appears to have regained control, especially over Trump, because, well, this is again conjecture. I'm just looking at what played out to try and tell you what it could be. Looks like they have something in Epstein files over Trump, and also they are also citing his personal greed. For example, his, the day after the coronation of Trump for his second term, you saw these meme coins being introduced. One, I think, on his name, and one on Melania's name, and then you saw the other Bitcoin thing that I think it was Eric Trump or Donald Trump Jr. One of the two had come to Pakistan and signed a treaty whereby they're going to do some things there. Pakistan is going to provide the power to create this coin, and they're going to use that as part of the minerals extraction and so on and so forth. Now, how far they'll succeed, we don't know, but looks like deep state may have some control of Trump, although I kind of doubt that, because there are other things that are happening where the deep state is getting badly hurt by Trump. And we have to wait and see where the balance is going to end up. Now, what is happening is they are experimenting, or they were experimenting under Biden's regime, what they had done to Europe by allowing, making the Biden administration to admit millions into United States. At last count, I have the howmanydeported.com number as I am recording. Today the number stands at 247,938. These were forcibly deported. The self-deportation appears to have been close to 1.6 million or so. So give or take, it's about 2 million who have left, but there are still 9 million official, or probably 19 million unofficial, who are still hanging around. You're seeing all the action happening in ICE centers where they are being raided. People are taking shots at them. This happened yesterday. So a lot of mess around all this stuff. But the Trump administration, I can kind of tell you, they are deporting close to 1,000 people every day. As to where they are headed and where they are being housed is anybody's guess. Some countries have accepted. 4 countries in Africa are now taking these as illegal, these refugees, and there's some arrangement whereby US is going to pay them some money. By the way, watch this thing till end. I'll tell you why Trump is insisting that Afghanistan hand over the control of Bagram completely to United States. I'll come to that in just a minute. So the new world order tests are now in play. They have also forced all these cities to become sanctuary cities. Who are the sanctuary city governors? These are all clowns like Gavin Newsom and Kochul and all these people, and Tim Walz. Everyone who is now a big leader in Democratic Party, these are all the people who completely drank the Kool-Aid that has been supplied by deep state. So God save America if these people ever come back to power. At least I hope it won't happen in my lifetime. It is believed that the Central Intelligence Agency, many people in State Department, US Fed, big banks, financial investment companies, pharma, military industrial complex, and high tech are fully under deep state ownership or control. This is again a belief. There is no proof that exists to say that this person is doing this bidding. But I can draw parallels. For example, we are completely shadow banned in surprise X, which used to be Twitter. And no matter how many times I've made my cause and case to Elon Musk, it continues on. They brought on a CEO, somebody who was a well-known leftist face. She recently quit. And I just said that this is completely a play of deep state, because the actions speak louder than any words, right? Be that as it may, what's going to happen to all these social media platforms is anybody's guess. I'm trying to see how I can break free of these, but it's not easy, because many of us are used to going to a particular platform to get our news, be it Facebook, be it Instagram, be it YouTube, be it TikTok, be it this, be it that, X, and so on and so forth. And we don't want to change habit. We don't want to go to a new platform to learn that interface, to see how videos are being played there. I mean, I can understand the inertia there. Be that as it may, this is the reality, and I hope people understand that if suddenly PGurus goes off the air in various platforms, you'll know the reason. That somebody somewhere in deep state has determined that the nuisance of PGurus is just too much. Now, this perhaps explains why Trump is unable to act either domestically or internationally without the deep state signing on it. Again, this is a pure conjecture on my part. I don't have proof. At the same time, I see all these going back and forth, which used to be a hallmark of the Biden administration also. Trump administration said that we are going to redact everything and release all Epstein files, only to not do it. Why? So these are just questions that refuse to go away. In the 4 years of Biden administration, like I said, a lot of illegals came in and they are parked somewhere, they are hidden somewhere. What are the reasons? Well, it appears that the short-term goal is to settle immigrants in red states so that their demographics can be altered. In the medium term, these will be used to foment internal unrest that could lead to civil war. The long-term goal is to provoke white Anglo-Saxon populations against immigrants, both legal and illegal, with the aim of fomenting unrest that could lead to attempts to overthrow the government and induce anarchy. This is where H1B comes in. I believe that is completely connected with this. So it's going to be a world of pain for Indian immigrants, and unless they stand up and fight. First they need to unite, then they start raising their voices, and then they start using their economic muscle to move things to go their way. Now, what is happening in the United States Federal Reserve? They are planning to introduce stable coins. I mean, stable coins as a concept has been approved in Genius Act. Now, what you are going to have is perhaps many banks, even Morgan Chase is readying its own stable coin to be able to issue those stable coins, and in return, when they have their own version of stable coin, in order for people to take their stable coin as opposed to Y or B bank, there will be some inducements, right? At the same time, what will also happen is inducement could be a higher rate of return. That if you have deposits in our bank, and if you agree to have a mix of stable coins and dollars, then the interest that we can give you for your deposits might be 0.5% more than what the other banks are willing to give. So what will happen is the interest rates will start changing. The whole idea appears to be to completely disband the Federal Reserve, because before the Federal Reserve came into picture, that was I think in Roosevelt era, Franklin Roosevelt era, there were 13 regional federal banks, and they had their own interest rates, which was not across the country. And that depended on what kind of business activity was taking place in those regions. And it might very well head back to that, which means the Federal Reserve is defanged. And it also tells you that this is a battle that's going on many fronts between Trump and the deep state, and maybe one of them is to completely disband Federal Reserve, in which case what happens is that you might go back to the situation where multiple banks will get back into the play. Big banks will do major lending or financing project like infrastructure project, while small community banks will start serving their local communities, where the bank manager knows you as a person, which is how banking used to be. Basel III and Basel I and Basel II and Mazel Tov, all these things, that has completely ruined this. I think it might be time to get back to the old ways, because if the bank manager knows you, then he's not going to insist on a Basel III reform that thou shalt pay back in this amount of time, rain or shine, deluge or famine, anything, it doesn't matter, you need to pay your money, which is how banks are acting today. So the crypto dollar, which is the stable coin, and each bank is expected to roll out their own stable coin. So there may be some differences here, one stable coin giving you better yield than the other, although you must remember the stable coin itself is tied to a dollar. The stable coin may not improve value, but it's what coming around that, what else they wrap around it in order for you to buy their stable coin as opposed to somebody else's stable coin. Now there will be a push to try and induce people to invest in crypto and gold ETFs rather than physical gold. By the way, did you know that many gold ETFs promise that whatever money you have in that can be exchangeable with gold at that day's price? But if you go and ask the ETFs today to say, okay, I don't want my money back, I want the equivalent gold, that they may not have it. This is a huge problem. And also we are seeing that close to 300 billion assets of Russia were frozen in Europe, and looks like the European countries have already consumed that. Again, this is, you can read and watch many videos, especially people like Martin Armstrong, who gives you a lot of information about all these things, because he's been a banker. He has extensive experience, close to 50 years of dealing with banks, countries, and so on and so forth. Now, with H1B thing ruling coming down the pipeline, is this an act of economic sabotage to try and cripple the United States from getting more dependent on them? And also, with all the drug that is proliferating into America, is it basically trying to make sure that the youth of the country are destroyed? And why is the deep state promoting wokeism and LGBTQ plus? Is it a form of social engineering aimed at reducing birth rates? There are unofficial reports that say that now you can have lab grown children. I mean, I shudder to imagine a thing like that. I mean, that means that basically we have graduated from growing potatoes and tomatoes to human beings in labs. Again, I shudder. Bioweapons labs in Ukraine targeting Slavs and China targeting South and East Asians are reportedly developing ethnicity-specific viruses. It is believed that they have the DNA codes of much of Indian army soldiers. Again, this is something that Elmer mentioned way back when we used to regularly chat. And this whole H1B crisis appears to be engineered to accelerate the decline of the US economy. And even as all this is happening, we know that companies like Microsoft and Amazon and Google, they are opening up massive data centers in the Middle East. And does that mean that they are going to have a big location of workers also there? We already know many of these companies are not headquartered in the United States. The whole thing about tax inversion, where the inversion comes from the fact that a small company that these would have incorporated in Ireland will end up buying this much larger trillions of dollars worth company. That's why it's inversion, because a company that is incorporated in Ireland attracts only 12% as corporate taxes. So a lot of things are happening, and we don't know what is going to happen to the United States military, which appears to be underperforming. In fact, now much of the stuff that US used to handle by way of sending its troops is being done by private military contractors. Who go into this? Good question. It could be a mercenary of any country, including Pakistan. So if the deep state engineers financial collapses, that's going to erode the trust of people in the country. In fact, the deep state plans to announce a new world order and seize control under the Homeland Security Emergency Act, overriding Congress and Senate during national security and financial crisis. This is all sounds, beyond the realm of possibility. Even I feel that way, but I just wanted to tell you that there are people who are getting paid millions of dollars to model these scenarios. What happens if this. Where does India stand in all that? India's current government has acknowledged the deep state threat and negotiated a truce to safeguard national development. What choice do they have? I mean, every time there is a disagreement, billions of dollars leave, and the rupee gets under stress, and suddenly RBI is releasing dollars into the market to shore up the exchange rate. It's also believed that deep state is redirecting some of its investments into India, as it sees India as the most viable option for high returns on investment. Angered by this alignment, Trump has targeted the EU, Japan, Korea, and now India, while avoiding direct conflict with the deep state. The next few years, what's going to happen is anyone's guess, but there is going to be economic turmoil. The current government in India is implementing preemptive measures to navigate upcoming geopolitical and geo-economic challenges. The outcomes of these strategies will require patience, careful observation, and also monitoring. There you have it. This was a bit of a longish talk. I thought I should mention to you all the different things that deep state has been accused of. Some of it could be hyperbole, but at the same time, you can see these disjointed events happening and leaders uttering opposite statements within a matter of days. It's been happening since the last 4 or 5 years. It's become much more prevalent, maybe because social media is able to bring things out as and when it happens and not give chance for somebody to shape the narrative. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Namaskar. Namaskar.